I went to look for the biggest mine, the biggest quarry, the biggest factory, the biggest dam on Earth. So everything became the largesse. And then trying to use a large format camera to render an exquisite detail. So when you see a figure, the scale reveals itself. And that was the way to kind of parse a very complex world. It allowed me to begin to show the scale at which we're operating, like in nature, that these images were in one frame able to really speak to the collective impact we're having. I kind of released myself from gravity when I started to work on the water project, realizing that when you get into a certain perspective and a certain height, the world can abstract very easily. So I was interested in that abstraction, but making sure that the abstraction did not overshadow the subject and the reality of what I was photographing. So I could photograph, certain farms in Spain, or I can do the pivot irrigation in Texas, and finding ways to photograph them that still talk about that human activity, but at the same time clearly talk about movements in art and form and thinking about color and shapes. And that, I think, makes me very different than, quote unquote, like a journalist or something like that, or strictly a documentary photographer. I'm working as an artist. I'm trying to find, again, these moments that the form is extraordinary at the same time that the subject is still intact. The work I did in India with, again, I did these step wells, and they had been photographed on and off by different photographers through time. And I kind of looked what was done, and I said, no, I want to do it differently. So I got the schematics of the step wells, and I figured out how to get above them and shoot down. So I had a 50-foot pneumatic pole that I shipped to India, and with the remote head was able to put my Hasselblad and be at a point of view that no one ever, and looking down into these beautiful step wells, that no one had ever kind of looked at these things from that perspective. We, humans, before the Industrial Revolution, saw nature as an omnipresent force. Turner and gale force winds, eating up a ship at sea. The whole Moby Dick story is nature is omnipresent. We are dwarfed by its power. We are in awe and in fear of its power. But yet, we're drawn to it. We're kind of like mesmerized by it. So it's this kind of repulsion attraction to the sublime. Now with the Industrial Revolution and working at this scale, it's the kind of like an inversion. Now nature's been diminished, so we've created jets that fly over the storms. We've created ships that don't break up at sea. We have cars and homes that keep us warm in the winter and cool in the summer. And in the creation, in the isolating us from the forces of nature, we've released another kind of sublime, the industrial sublime. And now when you go into nature and see the scale that we're operating, we are dwarfed in our own creation of industrial creation. So we are small, workers in a massive theater, using huge equipment to move tons of material around. So to me, it's kind of the industrial sublime. We are now the force of nature to be feared. That is awesome and fearful and wondrous and dangerous. I shot mines for years and years, and thinking that this was a place where I can photograph and in one frame show the cumulative effect that we have on a landscape. Every picture I take has to refer to our relationship with the natural world, with going to the places in nature that we're harvesting things for our urban existence and rural existence for that matter. Most recently, I started doing a project on water and trying to see how we shape water, how we shape the landscape and redivert water to our purposes, looking at terraforming deserts, looking at cities that are in the desert like Phoenix, Scottsdale, or Vegas, looking at a lot of different ways in which we respond to water, how waterfront as a real estate play or just as a play for entertainment, or waterfront as a spiritual place where we cleanse our souls, like going to India and showing the Kumbh Mela festival. So there was a whole bunch of ways I wanted to interpret water as a life-giving force. A lot of my work was trying to find the stills. And the film, I had a DOP, Nick DePensier, who was handling the camera. And so he was looking at what I was shooting, and then he was trying to figure out how to use the film camera to extend the shot, to extend the context of what I was doing. And then Jennifer, who I co-directed with, would also then try to find the stories on the ground that explains what it is that everybody's seeing, so that in the film we can not just be hovering from that perspective, which disembodies, which doesn't, I think film, we want to connect in film with somebody, something. And if it's a complete disembodied experience, I don't think it's as rich as a combined, visual experience from a overview, and then understanding on the ground what is that event and who are the people, and hearing their voices tell their stories about what's happened or what's happening in that landscape or in that space. You can't help but feel this kind of grief for the loss of what's happening, how we're pushing the natural world back for our needs. I have a daughter that's 16 and one that's 19, and I worry about their future. And I think anybody who has kids today, if they're not worried even about their own future, let alone their kids, but we're already seeing the beginnings of change, and the change isn't positive. So there is a lament, there is a loss, a sense of loss of habitat that will ultimately, if we hurt nature in a way that's almost irreparable, we're hurting ourselves. If the oceans collapse, then we're kind of done for.